Hello, I'm Bas Hamer, and this is a series on how to build testing frameworks using a domain-specific language. And we'll be doing this utilizing Gherkin and Cucumber. Source code is available on GitHub, and articles related to these topics you'll be able to find on possumlabs.com. I am Bas Hamer, and I've been building frameworks like these for a number of years as Possum Labs. Gherkin is a language. What you're looking at right now is actually Gherkin. It's set up as features which have scenarios, and scenarios have very simple language to describe what they are validating. So in this particular case, our feature is called DSL testing frameworks powered by Gherkin and Cucumber. Our scenario is called introduction. We also have a background. Background are steps that happen before every single one of these scenarios. And a step is one of these lines. So given this is a presentation by Bas Hamer, it is a step. And he has built the frameworks for companies as Possum Labs is another step. And is just a repeat of the previous thing, so you don't have to say given and then given again. You have usually given, when, and then steps. And in the scenario below, you'll find those details. So let's cover some of these basic terms. First of all, what's Gherkin? Well, Gherkin is this language. It's a very structured line-based language. Most statements are single line. What's Cucumber? Now, Cucumber is the bit of glue that takes this Gherkin and runs it against a programming language you're familiar with. I believe the first version of Cucumber was built against Ruby, but you can also download it for Java or JavaScript, and probably more. There's also something called SpecFlow, which is effectively Cucumber for C#. This is what it's intended to be used for, which is BDD, Behavior-Driven Development. This definition comes from the behat.org site. Behavior-driven development is a software development methodology in which an application is specified and designed by describing how its behavior should appear to an outside observer. And here are some examples from the documentation. Wilson posts to his own blog. I'm logged in as Wilson. I try to post to Expensive Therapy. Then I should see your article has been published. Now, each of these three scenarios by itself is fairly explanatory, although there's a little bit of magic behind it because you have to know that Wilson is associated to this Expensive Therapy blog. Now, what we're going to be dealing with is called a DSL, a domain-specific language. Domain-specific language is a computer language specialized to a particular application domain. A particular domain we'll be talking about is testing an application. This is in contrast to general purpose language. Think like C, C#, Java, JavaScript, which is broadly applicable across domains. So what we're going to create is a very simple language which can only be used for testing a particular and specific application. Think of this as the programming languages that you would find in like a Lego Mindstorm kit. Right? It's very specific. It doesn't have a lot of the general purpose capabilities that you'll find in most other languages. But it's also much easier to understand because you don't have to know all of that information. Learning C#, it should be easy. There's only about 100 different keywords. But when it comes down to the details, because the keywords are so narrowly defined, it's actually surprisingly hard. So now we have the same scenarios, but we have them rewritten as a domain-specific language. So we have a background, given the new user U1 and the new user U2 and the new blogs, and it describes that we have three blogs, B1, 2, and 3. The first one's owned by user 1, the second and third are owned by user 2, and the third one has a manager of user 1. Right, so now our scenarios, which are the same scenarios we saw before, post to your own blog. So we are logged in as user 1. When we try to post to B1, that is owned by user 1, then the article should be published. When I try to post to B2, blog 2 is owned by user 2, I should be getting a message that says that this is not my blog. And if we try to post to B3, because we are associated as a manager, then we should again see the message, your article was published. Now, there are some very big differences in this compared to the BDD example you saw before. First of all, we have defined some variables. We have U1, which we refer to a number of times, U2, and B1, 2, and 3. Right now, I'm just using single letter variables, but these can, of course, be as descriptive as you'd like them to be. This is not something that exists in Gherkin out of the box. So this is something we're going to have to implement. But by implementing this, we are able to define scenarios and make a fairly complicated scenarios reusing the same steps over and over and over again. Okay, BDD versus DSL. BDD is a methodology. It teaches you how to do this. A DSL is a technology. It's a tool. So when should you be using a BDD approach? BDD is fantastic if you're starting a new project or it's a project that lends itself to implementing this. The DSL approach is primarily in cases where you don't have those conditions. You're actually dealing with most likely an existing application which has a quality problem. So the problems we'll be focusing on bringing an existing system on a test. There may be applications that have been in production for sometimes over a decade and there's no automated testing on them. We're going to be focusing on how can we build tests around that and get people to the point where they have more faith in their releases. We're going to figure out how to make our tests tolerant to change. So for instance, especially in older applications, people are updating the technologies that they're using. They may be updating the user interface technologies. They may be updating the API technologies. But we're trying to build our tests in a way that we're tolerant to that change. So our tests will be focusing on verifying the functionality, but they will not focus much on the details around, okay, did anything change on this page? It will just focus on, does the functionality still work? The perk is that when people refactor a page, your test should not break. And the other thing that we're going to be focusing on is providing accessible automated testing. Most companies have subject matter experts available, but they may not actually have people who have experience in automated testing, and they may not have access to a lot of developers to build something like that out. Right now, especially where I'm located in Denver, Colorado, it's hard to hire developers. So what we're going to be focusing on is how do we make something that gets our domain experts to actually be able to write automated tests. And a lot of that comes down to building an easy to understand, accessible domain-specific language for them to define those tests in and that they are able to maintain. So in future sessions, we'll be going over some more details around Gherkin and Cucumber. And then we will have implementation sessions for both cucumber.js, which is the JavaScript version, as well as Gherkin, which is the C# version. We will be talking how to do testing with a web browser, Selenium on Selenium Grid. And we will be covering how we're going to have to interact with APIs, how we can interact with the database, and how we can interact with things like an enterprise service bus. In general, these are the biggest areas that are relatively stable, and because they're relatively stable, they're good places to test for functionality, because if the code behind is changing a lot and you're putting your tests there, you're going to have a hard time maintaining them. All right. Thank you for watching. Please give any feedback in the comments below, and I'll see you for the next lesson.